Now, this is the part of the program that I've been looking forward to because we get to honor some of our employees, and it's the presentation of our Extra Mile Awards. This year we're acknowledging 10 employees, each put aside his or her own personal safety to come to the aid of someone else. They are our heroes. We're proud of them, and I want to extend my personal thanks to each of them for making TxDOT and Texas a better place. John Barton will make our Extra Mile Award presentations this morning, but before he does, John, I'm honored to say, has just been named as a distinguished graduate of the Zachary Department of Civil Engineering here at Texas A&M University. John, again, congratulations to you. You are truly a premier ambassador for this university, for the College of Engineering, for the Zachary Department of Civil Engineering, and a premier ambassador for the Texas Department of Transportation. We're proud of you.
Thank you, General Weber. I appreciate that kind introduction, and I want to thank all of you for what you do each day, the 11,900 strong that make this agency such a great place. It's a privilege to represent you, and I know that that award that I've been fortunate to receive from the Zachary School of Civil Engineering here at the department is due in large part to the fine work that all of you do, all 11,900 of you, and it's a privilege and honor to work for you and to serve alongside you. As General Weber said, today we will be honoring 10 of our co-workers from across the state, from the Panhandle all the way down to the Valley, and a few points in between, who every day, they and their co-workers in every discipline, every district, every division, and every office unselfishly and tirelessly serve our fellow Texans. That's the hallmark of who we are as Texas Department of Transportation employees. But occasionally some of us are placed in an opportunity where we go above that call of duty, where we take our commitment to service to the next level and one step beyond. Whether that is preventing a tragedy that occurs while we're on a roadway, offering comfort and assistance and reassurance to someone who has found themselves in a difficult situation, or saving a life. We have individuals who are at the right place at the right time when someone, somewhere, a fellow Texan, a visitor to our great state, needs their help. And so today, we have several honorees who have gone that extra mile. And we want to publicly thank them for their courage. It's an honor for me to share the stage with them and to share with you their stories today. And General Weber, I may have to admit that I feel like I'm having an allergic reaction to Lance's snuff. So as I go through this process, if I tear up a little bit, it's not that I'm crying, it's that Lance has infected me with his Copenhagen. At this time, I would like to call up our first honorees to the stage. They are James Adams, Josh Cornelison, and Frank Jett from the Dallas County Maintenance Section. Gentlemen, if you'll join me on the stage. It was sometime just after midnight on December the 6th, 2013. Many of you may remember that night because we were beginning to be gripped with a winter storm here across Texas. Temperatures were down in the 20s and they were dropping fast. Dallas streets and the highways all across the Metroplex, which are usually hotbeds of activity, even at that late hour of the evening, were eerily empty. There was the occasional car or two, drivers rushing to get home before the winter storm took a turn for the worst. And they didn't have much time to wait because it was coming on us fast. In just a few short hours, a great deal of North Texas would be firmly in the clutches of this bone-chilling polar vortex that made national news. A cold weather pattern so brutal that it would eventually dump, as you recall, 3 to 4 inches of ice all across that region of our state. And for the next 12 hours, most of us, most North Texans included, were sheltering in their homes, warm and safe, but not everyone had that luxury. While many of the Dallasites were fighting the cold behind closed doors, some of our employees were working hard at it, and these included James Adams, who is one of our equipment operators, Josh Cornelison, one of our transportation technician professionals, and Frank Jett, who is one of our equipment mechanics. They were in the thick of it, out there working the storm, and on that frigid night, their duty station led them to a material stockpile near the Lamar Street overpass in downtown Dallas. The three of them were refilling a truck with sand and salt materials they'd been using throughout the night to treat the area's icy roads. And by 2 o'clock that morning, with winds as high as 25 miles an hour consistently and much higher, we're making the temperatures feel a lot lower than the thermometer read of 20 degrees. This trio of men and a loader they were using were getting a workout that night. They were putting sand and salt on trucks that had been used to keep ice at bay on those roadways, and more loads were going to be used throughout the night all over the Metroplex. They would be covering a lot of miles that night. And it had come time yet for another stop to load another truck to treat another section of roadway. And the three of them there at this stockpile location, wrapping themselves tightly in their coats, were getting out to make up another load of sand and salt. And that's when Frank heard a noise, a sound of splashing water. And he turned just in time to see a man's head barely above the water near them in that creek. The man had reached out his hand on the creek bank to try to claw his way out of the water, but the bank was too slippery, and he fell back into the frigid water. A thin layer of ice had already coated the ground, and he is losing his grip and went back underwater yet again. He came back up and tried yet another time, and so Frank and James and Josh, observing all this, rushed to help him. But that would prove to be very difficult. With every step they took, the cold wind fought against them. The slippery ground was their enemy. But unwavering, they finally reached the man and pulled him out of this icy water. He was cold, wet, and shivering, and this man clung to his three rescuers as they took him back to their truck. As they walked, the man told them that he was a homeless man, one of our least and lowest in society. And he had been gathering random bits of scrap wood near the creek to keep himself warm and alive that night before he fell in. When they got him back to the truck, they immediately called for an ambulance and started trying to look for something, anything they could find, to keep this newest passenger of theirs dry and warm. An old T-shirt they found in the back of the truck was used as a makeshift towel. And they had to keep this man warm and alive until the medics would arrive. And because of the icy conditions, it meant that might take quite a bit of time. But time was just something that they couldn't afford to wait on. So James and Frank and Josh, noticing that the man was having an increasingly difficult time moving his hands and his arms and talking, and his legs already beginning to lock up, with his body temperature falling fast, hypothermia setting in, realized that he needed to be warmed up and heated up. So they found a rain slicker in their truck. They wrapped the man in that. They heated the cab of a pickup while they helped him remove some of his soggy clothes and his shoes, and kept him awake by talking to him until help finally did arrive. And because of the heroic efforts of James and Josh and Frank and their quick actions, their calmness in the wake of this emergency, that homeless man, whom they never had met, spent the night in a hospital bed, warm and safe, and eventually fully recovered. Oddly enough, a few days later, the three of these men were back at work treating roads ahead of that second winter storm that we faced in this area, when unexpectedly, at this same location, a homeless man showed up. He looked a lot healthier and happier when he repeatedly thanked them for the help they gave him that night. He expressed his deep gratitude for this crew and told them, had it not been for their quick actions, his death that bitter cold night would have been certain. So James, Josh, and Frank, we are very proud of your efforts your heroic actions, and your response to a fellow human being that cold, dark winter night. You truly are heroes, and we're proud of you. Thank you for going that extra mile. Next, I would like to call to the stage to join us our Lubbock District Equipment Operators, Rusty Ray and Manuel de la Cruz. Gentlemen, if you will please join us on the stage. As we know, all heroes have their own tools of the trade. Thor has a hammer. Iron Man has his suit. Captain America is nothing without his trusty shield. And I'll add one in. Sorry for this, Phyllis. Popeye has his spinach. You know who my favorite is. Some heroes don't go in for all that kind of flash and hype. Some heroes prefer tools of a more mundane type, like a big red soda and a bag of potato chips. Just ask Rusty and Manuel. This past November, these two equipment operators were dispatched to remove snow on Loop 289 after one of Lubbock's notorious winter storms. It was a cold front that had blown through the South Plains a few days earlier, leaving gusty winds and an accumulation of sleet and a dusting of snow in its wake. All of that just a few days before Thanksgiving and the customary onslaught of traffic by Texans driving to Grandma's house for the holidays. Our Lubbock crews are used to that. Thanksgiving just wouldn't be Thanksgiving without a serving of snow as a side dish for their Thanksgiving holidays. So on this particularly cold November day, Rusty and Manuel and their snowplow were busy clearing a path on the loop when they saw a car up ahead of them swerving all over the road. And despite the conditions, traction on the road were relatively still good, so this was no motorist that was just losing control due to the snow and ice. They kept their distance, watching the cars around them giving this swerving vehicle a huge berth, and they didn't have to watch long before this car and its driver came to a complete stop in the middle of the loop. Something clearly was wrong. Manuel told Rusty that he was going to check on the driver just to see if everything was all right. So Manuel got out of the dump truck and started walking towards the vehicle. Not quite sure what to expect, he walked toward the car slowly and carefully, with the sound of snow crunching under his boots. And within a few feet of getting to the car, he caught a glimpse of the driver's silhouette as he sat staring straight ahead. As Manuel kept walking toward the car, the driver suddenly and unexpectedly sped away. So he got back in the dump truck, and these two men continued clearing the snow from the loop, with the car never far from their thoughts and continuously within their eyesight as it traveled further up the loop, still swerving in and out of the traffic lanes. And then, as if on cue, the driver stopped again. Manuel got out of the truck again and started to approach the car, this time a little faster than the last, and he didn't want the car to get away. As he approached the driver's side of the car and leaned toward the window, he looked inside and he saw that the driver was sweating profusely, shaking, and was clearly very confused. Manuel recognized these symptoms immediately and asked the man if he was diabetic. The man indicated that he was, and by judging his actions, his blood sugar was obviously dangerously low. So Manuel ran back to the truck and grabbed the two things that he knew would help, that big red soda and his bag of chips that he'd brought with him that day. And he ran back to the car, ripped open the bag, popped the top off the soda, and gave them to the driver, who took them in as if they were a very lifeline to him. And while the driver ate and drank his way back to normalcy, Manuel asked him to move over so he could move his vehicle out of way. All the while Rusty had called for emergency personnel and was directing traffic around this stranded car, keeping both Manuel and the driver safe. After a few minutes, emergency services finally arrived and took over, taking care for this man whose blood sugar level was an alarming and dangerously low 32. And for those of you who know anything about blood sugar levels, that is an amazing thing, even after he had consumed the chips and the soda that Manuel had given to him. Fortunately for this driver, this story does have a happy ending. He was eventually discharged from the hospital after being treated with his blood sugar back to normal conditions again. And he is now safely able to continue his life and travel on the roadways around the Lubbock area. Manuel, Rusty, thank you for teaching us that all of us in the right time and place can be superheroes. And thank you for your commitment to others, for going the extra mile. Next, I'd like to call to the stage Jose Garcia, Santiago Hernandez, Antonio Moreno, and Angel Renteria, Jr., all of the FAR district. Gentlemen, would you please join me on the stage? For most of the morning on November the 13th, and it's interesting to note, we've been talking about winter storms in November, now we're talking about a paving operation in November. Just indicates how big a state Texas is. For most of the morning on November the 13th, this crew from the Roma Maintenance Office had been hard at work on an overlay project on US 83 in Starr County. That work is never easy, and to do the job, they had to close one of the eastbound lanes of US 83, and that made for some added traffic, hurried drivers in and through our maintenance work zone. After several hours out in the cold weather, the crew finally had broken for lunch. Tired and hungry, these men split up, looking for a little spot of their own, if you will, where they could enjoy their meal away from the work zone. One of our general maintenance technicians, Santiago Hernandez, took his lunch from the back seat of his state vehicle and settled inside the cab of his truck. Jose Garcia, one of our equipment operators, and one of our transportation technician professionals, Angel Renteria and Antonio Moreno, moved to a vehicle behind the cold mix stockpile they were working that day. Santiago had parked his vehicle near the closed lane, and from that vantage point, he had a good look at the traffic that was exiting the roadway just before the closure. And it also gave him a bird's eye view of the westbound traffic that was maneuvering through that maintenance work zone. Since those lanes didn't need to be closed, traffic in that direction was moving along at a normal pace, and maybe just a little bit too fast. About that time, one of the vehicles, traveling way too fast and without warning, veered into the grassy median on US 83, began to roll, and Santiago watched as it hit the pavement once and then twice, tossing its 16-year-old driver out of the vehicle, over the median, and into the oncoming lanes of the eastbound traffic. The car eventually came to a rest in the travel lane and the shoulder, and Santiago knew that he had to act very fast. The driver and the car had landed in a location where they couldn't be seen by the other drivers, and it wouldn't be long, if something wasn't done, before another car would potentially hit the injured driver that was laying in the roadway, or maybe, just as bad, cause another crash. So Santiago got on his radio and called for help, and then ran out into the highway, blocking traffic, using his arms, his vest, and his voice, hoping to get the injured driver out of the way in time. Jose, Angel, and Antonio soon followed him, forming somewhat of a human moving traffic block, if you will, by standing in the road, getting the attention of the oncoming traffic and diverting them. Fortunately for them, help came in another way as well. An unmarked police vehicle was traveling in that area, and the officer immediately turned on his red and blue emergency lights and maneuvered into a position to direct the traffic around this area. With traffic under control, they then turned their attention to this 16-year-old driver. He was still conscious, but was badly bruised. Their primary concern was keeping him as comfortable as possible until emergency crews arrived. And the good news is that this driver miraculously survived this horrific crash, but it could have been far worse that day had it not been for these gentlemen that we are honoring. So Jose, Santiago, Antonio, and Angel, thank you for your selfless actions and for going the extra mile. We are very, very proud of you. At this time, I would like to call Jeremy Metter from our Fort Worth district to the stage. I think this one may be the one where the allergies kick in a bit. This past March, our Wise County maintenance technician, who is with us today, Jeremy Metter, and Ronnie Abernathy were on their way to install some signposts on US 380 just east of Bridgeport. It's an unusual assignment for this crew. Jeremy usually was the one that drove, and Ronnie, as always, was riding shotgun, giving Jeremy a hard time about stories with his family, the weather, anything and everything that was on Ronnie's mind, including his plans for growing his mom and pop lawn mowing business. That's Ronnie. That's who he was. An incessant need to stay busy, a ball of energy. Ronnie often said, you get what you work for, and that's the way he lived his life. And on that spring day in March, Ronnie was doing what he always did, working and talking. But not long into the drive, the talk became less and less, and clearly something was wrong. So Ronnie told Jeremy that he wasn't feeling well, and he even joked that it probably was just indigestion. So assuring him that nothing was wrong, they stopped at a convenience store, got a little antacid, and were back on their road to their assigned duty station. Ronnie ate a couple of the antacid tablets and was feeling better and was back to his old self. By the time they got to the work site, he was feeling better. They got out, no time to waste, and started to work, and Ronnie was going to make sure he got the job done. But he still wasn't feeling quite right, and it wasn't long after they started working that Ronnie quietly turned, leaving the post hole digger there, and walked back to the truck. And as Jeremy turned around to see if he was okay, Ronnie looked at him, walked a few feet further, and then collapsed on his back with his hard hat hitting the edge of the pavement. Jeremy, our hero, rushed over to him. Ronnie was still conscious but unresponsive, and with no time to lose, Jeremy ran to the truck, called 911, staying calm in this most difficult situation. And then he turned his full attention to his partner and his friend, Ronnie. "An ambulance is coming, Ronnie," is what Jeremy told him. "Everything is going to be okay." Ronnie didn't respond, and Jeremy noticed that his breathing was starting to become a little labored. And just then, as Ronnie raised his arms, uttered a few words to Jeremy that he couldn't understand, Ronnie stopped moving. So Jeremy knew that he couldn't wait for the ambulance, and as a volunteer firefighter for 11 years, he knew that he could do something and had to do something. He rolled Jeremy over on his side, checked for his pulse, and started performing chest compressions. 8 minutes. 8 minutes later, an ambulance arrived. The EMTs took over for Jeremy and used a defibrillator to shock Ronnie's heart back into a normal rhythm. And they loaded him into the ambulance to take him to the hospital, working with him a little longer. Ronnie, you see, was in cardiac arrest, but because of Jeremy's quick actions and performance of chest compressions before they arrived, Ronnie's heart was still beating. It wasn't long before they were able to get him to the hospital, and so back at the office, Jeremy and his coworkers waited to hear about Ronnie's condition. And unfortunately, a couple hours later, they got the word that their friend, their coworker, a young man of 47 years old, had succumbed to the heart attack. It's been a long time since that day in March. I remember it well when we lost Ronnie. And Jeremy tells us that he thinks about his friend and his coworker every day. When he drives his old truck, he still sometimes finds notes that Ronnie wrote, reminders of things that Jeremy needed to do. Jeremy, I'm sure that Ronnie knows how much you care about him and how hard you worked to save him that day. And I thank you, Jeremy, on behalf of all of your brothers and sisters at this agency, for not just being his coworker, but also for being his friend and for going the extra mile for him that day.